Assuming.
We are live, folks. Welcome to the third panel of the day for Hollerween 2, a celebration of all things Savage Worlds and Holler, which is an Appalachian apocalypse now on Kickstarter. So this panel is Kids at the RPG Table, and we are joined by some Savage Worlds friends. Mr. Peter Hildreth, welcome. And Clint Black from Plague. There we go.
Plague.
It started.
I'm from the Plague.
Started. The pineappleisms have begun. Clint Black and the lovely Jodi and Clint. Welcome. So today's topic, this is a great panel on how to play and run and design for kids at the RPG table. So exciting topic. Peter, we were just talking about, despite not being horror, you're in on Holler. There's some horror elements in Holler. There's some good stuff in there. But what kind of games do you find? First question to kick us off. What genres do you run for kids? What are the best genres you found to run for the younger set?
Actually, I've run everything from fantasy to pulp to modern day Man from U.N.C.L.E. to Victorian, a little bit of horror, all successfully. So I think anything that adults like, kids like too.
Good answer.
You got to be able to explain it to them, so you've got to be fully invested. And if you don't know what the kids are into, then you can't talk about it. True.
And I found in like the pulp, just ask them, hey, do you know who Indiana Jones is? Oh, yeah. Or, so if you can relate it to something that they know, it clicks like that for them.
Yeah.
Clint, what games what genres do you dare run for kids? Or is it everything because, kids like, I like that answer. I think that kind of, that does answer the thing is, kids are special, but they're not that special, man. You can, don't have to treat them with kid gloves.
There is a reason there are so many Goosebumps novels out there. Kids like horror as much as anything else. Anything that's made for kids can become a kid game, My thing is find something kids enjoy, but then find something also that you're going to be excited about. When I designed a con game just to run for kids, I used dinosaurs because I love dinosaurs. Kids love dinosaurs. It was Dinosaur Action Rescue Team, DART. The kids got to be members of DART, where they went back to try to rescue dinosaurs from men who were going into the past to like poach and hunt dinosaurs.
I may use that one with my grandchildren.
Yeah, and of course, you get into the thing of, oh, kids love this stuff. One of these boys was the best sniper I have ever had as a player in my life. This kid's got like a tranquilizer gun and is on like in a tree taking people out.
That is true. I mean, the creepiest player I've ever had at the table was also a kid in gaming. We were playing a low power supers campaign, and the kid's dad was at the table, and this kid's superpower was he could make 1 pound of material disappear. And so his little favorite tactic was he ran up to an enemy and was like, where's my mommy? Help me, sir. And gave the guy a hug. And while he was hugging him, he made, like 1 pound of the guy's interior disappear. And that was a pretty effective way of dealing with the enemies. And I was just, I look at the kid's dad and I'm like, is this okay? And the guy's like, it's fine. But yeah. I mean, kids and their unlimited imaginations are kind of fantastic at the table. But it is good when the parents know that they're involved. So how about start there? Like in designing gaming for kids and in running games for kids, what is different? Like, we've hit it that most of it's the same, but what different approaches do you guys take for gaming and writing RPGs for kids?
Peter, you want to go first?
Well, like I said, I've run just about everything. What I found is I just assumed I ran a Victorian pulp, and they get a letter from Sherlock Holmes, their friend, saying, I'm out of town. Can you look into this for me? Well, I just assumed everybody knows who Sherlock Holmes is. No idea. So I said, well, he's a detective who's a friend of yours, and went on with the adventure. So I think it's what, Jodi mentioned briefly. Find out what they like, find out what they're into. I didn't, because I was writing games for all of the kids' games I ran, well, not all, but most of them were at Gen Con. I started back in the 90s. For a bunch of years, I ran kids' games because I got married. Wife was widowed with 2 little girls, so I ran games so that they would have games to play and meet other kids at Gen Con. When they grew out of it, I stopped until my wife said early in 2005, actually, I looked it up, said, being at Gen Con is enough for you, just being there. But she says, I need something more. How about you run games and I'll help you? And that's how we started doing that. And for about 4 or 5 years, I guess, we ran them. Some of the best game players but they didn't get to pick them. I had to, write them ahead of time. And after the first year, they just signed up for whatever it was. So I didn't have sort of that, what do you know? What do you want to play? But I went the gamut, just like I run adult games, and it was fine.
Yeah, I was going to say that for me, the real telling feature of a kid's game is to let them know that they are invited. So it can be any genre, pretty much. If you've got all of your adult friends and you're sitting around drinking beer, maybe not the best one for them. But, if you've got a game that you're running at a convention and you say, this is a game for kids, or children are welcome, then you might get a kid to show up. Maybe you don't. But if you've got it planned and you've got it available for them, like I've got a Deadlands game where they're investigating the deaths of some saloon gals. So they can be dancers, or you can read between the lines. It depends on the age group of who's there, and it can be a very adult game. Or it's just that you're helping out some girls who are making some money by dancing with the cowboys, because saloon girls were absolutely a thing,
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, okay, that sounds like it would be kind of fun. And I've run it for all ages. And it's a really fun game. So, so I think that the main telling point of what's a kid's game is that it's for kids, that they are invited to the table. And I know so many people who are not comfortable with that. So it's like, yeah, John's got it figured out. So, you have to be able to be flexible as a GM, especially if you've got little people who are going to interrupt you every 5 seconds. You might want to institute some extra, setting rules at the table if you've got a whole table of nothing but little people. But as far as like, what are you going to play? It can be anything. And I've got some other stories I'd love to share on that, but I want to hear what Clint has to say. Oh, Peter, what were you going to say?
I just wanted to say one thing that came to mind because of what you said. My games at Gen Con were kids only. The first year we had 2 groups, 11 to 13 and 9 to 10, because there's some kind of educational break. But we found we scrapped that because we had an 8-year-old playing in the 11 to whatever, and she was one of the best role players there because she had experienced it. So I didn't let any adults in because they would defer, even if they didn't do it on purpose, they would defer to the adult, and the adult would lead at everything. So yeah,
that's a very good point.
Yeah. The only things I've done to like prepare specifically for kids is doing what Peter's saying when I designed a game specifically just for kids. And when you're doing those at cons, the easiest way to get into that is to do it with a convention that already has a kids track. Because usually you get the dedicated space that they have for that, and they'll let you run the game there. And that not only lets you run for kids, but it also means probably around you, you've got an audience of kids who are going to run out and want to sign up for the next game, or if somebody has to leave, they'll jump in and take a seat. That's Jodi's experience before running games. But one thing I did for that was I made each of the characters a very easy archetype to understand, which was easy with Savage Worlds, in that each one of them had a very specific edge that made them better at what they did themselves. But in general, most of the characters had the same basic traits. So if I told one kid, hey, if you want to make a healing roll, you're rolling this die type to do it. But if you're the medic and you've got the healer edge, oh, well, you're better at that than you're the best at it as everybody else, for that kind of stuff. Or if you're the dinosaur wrangler, and you've got beast bond, you've got the way to connect to the animals and things like that, of each one having a very specific kind of hook to them that made it easy for the kids to have kind of an instant buy-in with that character, something that they saw as an archetype that you kind of see in kids' stories, and of course you give them those easy things and then the kids knock it out of the park with what they'll play, and do. It's amazing. But yeah, that's one way that I try to set up, again, specifically running a game focused just to bring kids to the table for like one of the same reason Peter says they'll defer to an adult, but if it's just kids, then they're free to do what they want to do more so. Yeah.
So
And
how do
you
you
do-
approach? Go ahead, Jodi.
Well, I was just going to say that you do kind of want to let them be as creative as they are, because they will totally throw you a curveball. It's amazing.
I had the Victorian one. They were in the sewers of London where this mad scientist was taking humans and melding them with machines and sending them out to wreak havoc. And they were steampunk, with the pipes and the steam coming up. They disabled one and made friends with it. And he joined their side. It was like, well, that was the last thing I thought that they would do. And of course he lived while they grew up. So the next generation had this friend of the family, Mr. whatever steampunk guy they got new machinery. But yeah, it was, it's just mind boggling. They think better than some of the adults, I think.
And I mean, that's one of the great things about running games for kids is it's sparking a fire to your own creativity when you get to be around them and all the ideas they can have, because there's no preconceptions, and they will run with their imagination and creativity in ways that are just phenomenal.
Yep.
So first audience questions from John. So he's got two young boys. He wants to get in the hobby. What age do you start playing with them, and how do you get them?
Okay, so I'm going to start with when our babies were toddlers, we had them just roll a die on a table and count the pips. So very young, just roll a die. And then, okay, what number are you going to get next? They're only competing with themselves. There's no story here whatsoever, but they're getting familiar with dice and with rolling them. And it's a counting game, basically. So we're not even talking role playing at that point. And then you can also just go a little bit farther and start doing your bedtime stories as, as interactive things. So like, okay, let's pretend that you are, a fairy princess, what is, and you're stuck in a tower. You're basically doing the story of Rapunzel, right? So how do you get out of the tower, And now they're the ones who are telling you the story, for bedtime or something like that. So what's been your experience, Peter?
Well, I have grandchildren, and for a long time, her parents were not. The oldest one's parents were not. They didn't want me to do role playing because they didn't want conflict. They didn't want fighting, and now they've come around when she's 10. But we'd really been doing role playing for years. She came up with this game if I was driving somewhere with her, where she would say, okay, we're the fruit police. And we were in charge of solving crimes dealing with fruit. So we went through, I'm like, okay, I'm driving along. Okay, let's play fruit police. I'm like, okay, what fruit haven't we used? And what's this? How do you And then late, as she got older, she started changing the story. So now they've said, oh yeah, well, okay, we don't mind if there's conflict. Maybe it'd be good getting not aggression, but anger out or whatever.
Mhm.
So now I start, and she wants to lead the story. So I have to teach her that no, you don't. She could have played, years ago. One of the first game I ran in the 2000s at Gen Con. One little girl, she was so little, she was almost 8, almost 9, something like that. She was 2 years at least too young for the game that I was running. But her mother said she's played before. We do a lot of games. And I said, okay. She was one of the best there was. And I don't know where I was going with that thread, but she must have been playing from 6 and 7. Like, I mean, so I think it depends on the child. I mean, my 7-year-old would not be able to play role-playing games right now. I think it depends on the kid. So
it definitely does.
I will say, when Jodi says that our children were rolling dice and playing with them from a young age, to give you an idea of how young that was, our oldest daughter's first complete sentence was with a tray with an oversized set of polyhedral dice, and I am on the phone with my mother, and her first complete sentence is, "I love dice."
nothing wrong with that.
As a gamer parent, I scream. Oh my God. That was the very first complete sentence. And I'm like, yes. And it's like, thus begins, the payment process to all the dice manufacturers everywhere. But
that is fantastic. How do I not know that story already? I mean,
I know that's a great story.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. It was fantastic. But I mean, I was actually just talking to somebody about this today, about when we've done these panels at other conventions, we've done them with our kids, and our younger, even as, at 10, 11 years old, would say the key is finding the game and story and things that fit, the individual. I mean, both of our daughters ran convention games at 9 years old. And the key was they were both for games and systems that they loved the stories of. Our older one loved the RPG Fairy's Tale, where it's basically kind of like the Tinkerbell RPG. You play fairies trying to protect the woods. And the younger one didn't like that much, but then she ended up finding, actually, our friend Stan with the Game Mechanics wrote an adventure game for the Warrior Cats novel series, and she was reading all of those, and she found this. And you could actually go to their website and download it. And she had a notebook with this printed out download and drawings of the cats. And that was what she ran at a convention. And I ended up taking that to Gen Con and getting him to sign it for her. And he was more thrilled than she was. He really was, because he said it was something that he had done on Spec. Basically, he had no feedback from it until I had showed him. I showed him that. And unlike every other RPG where the fans you interact with all the time, it seems like. But that was the thing, is finding something. And so if you've got younger kids, look at the books, the comics, the TV shows, what they watch, and there is some game out there that either does that, or you can do it with Savage Worlds, and and make that happen. Especially when they're younger, find what they like and let them play that.
And I mean, you don't need to use all of the rules from Savage Worlds. You can pare it down to be, just kind of a bare bones version. We've got some tips on that in the GM's guide that goes as a companion book to Suede. So, so I won't go through all of those here, but don't be so intimidated by all of the rules and trying to teach that to a 5-year-old. It's not going to work. Just tell them, like, okay, if you want to make that, you want to try to climb over the wall, you're going to pick up the purple die and roll that, Yeah. So
that was why when Holly said, "You run the games and I'll help," her help was basically being there when it was their turn, to make sure they got the right dice, and sort of train them. After, they'll learn fast, and they have memories that are unbelievable. I ran one game, I think it was the game where, I had it like 8 kids max, and kids kept coming, and Holly'd say, "Well, you could take one more, can't you?" I think it was 11 or 12 kids, the oldest of whom was probably 11 or 12.
That
And
sounds very familiar. Yeah.
the next year, when we sat down to the game, he said, "Does Duravan still have the returning something? I don't know, some weapon that he could toss and it would come." I vaguely remembered because I gave him things holiday. I said, "Oh yeah, he's still got it." And I quickly wrote down on my sheet to remember. But that's a year of, but it's, maybe they got less in their brains than we, they haven't filled it up like we have, but they will remember these games for a long time.
Yeah.
Well, they just, they're so quick to pick up on the game mechanics. And I will say that's
Yes.
just my experience with it, about 5th grade, about 12 years old or so. And of course, again, we're talking about it's different for, for every child. So it could be 10 years old to 14 years old. It's, just an average. But they pick up on it super fast. So when I was doing a demo one time of Savage Worlds at our school picnic, and this is what Clint was talking about with them hot seating, like they were like clustered 8 around the table, and then they would leave to like go play in the bouncy house or something, and somebody else would step in and keep playing that character. And they were all the exact same character, by the way, the exact same stat, so I didn't get confused. But they, there's one kid I remember said, had heard me explain the rules for running, you're going to have -2 for multi-actioning. And then they were like, but they got the Joker, so they've got a +2. And they said, "Oh, so I can run and it's going to offset the modifier." And I'm like, there are middle-aged people who don't figure this out.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. I mean, the youngest I've game mastered for is middle school age. But I kind of start the same way with new players. It's very much the same as you ask them what they want to do, and then you show them how to do it right. So just tell me what you want to do, and then I'll explain how we do that mechanic in the game. And then between the first 3 or 4 rounds, but yeah, they really do pick up very quickly. So I think I wouldn't start with the mechanics. I wouldn't start trying to teach the game first. Just start with let's get into the adventure. Let's let's roll some dice. Tell me what you want to do, and I'll explain how to do it. But they do. You don't have to shy away from them. As long as you just explain them as you go, I think it's pretty effective. On that, I run for middle school kids, and the more at events that were designed for kids, like the middle school, high school here puts on a convention every year, and so the kids know they're at a convention. They're already gamers. All those questions are kind of solved for you already. But how do you approach running for kids differently as far as like theater of the mind versus miniatures versus maps? Do you find is there a difference that you guys have found between adult players and kids players on just how you storytell?
Well, nobody's jumping in, so I will.
We all want to speak so much.
Yeah, I know. It can go either way, hardcore either way. I mean, it really can. It's like when I ran my game, I mean, the kids loved the dinosaur miniatures, and it just wasn't so hardcore on how far they could get. It's like, well, I want to move over here. Well, you could probably get about halfway to there, or something like that, and we talk about like, these are the rules, this is how far, but if you look down at a map, you can eyeball it close enough to know, really, I mean, for that kind of thing, of how far you can get. And of course, as I mentioned before, I had, Sniper Boy up in a tree. It didn't matter how close he had to get.
Yeah, that's right.
Like, that was great, but it's like there's that. But then on the other side, it's like our daughter at like 8 ran a game for us that was complete theater of the mind, and she describes the castle we found in the woods and the drawbridge to go over and the creatures we were trying to rescue from the ogre. And as we run out, I mean, she does this great thing of the game she was running had basically an acing mechanic with multiple successes like Savage Worlds.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Jodi's character rolls fantastically, and she's just trying to pull out a stone to slow down the ogre who kidnapped all the things. And our daughter, Eiko, you pull out the stone that holds the castle together. And her wife is like, you mean the cornerstone? And she's like, yes, that's what you got. And the whole castle starts to collapse. She turned it into this, before we even had him, this dramatic task as... yes, we're escaping. And as far as, theater of the mind description, like we all make it out and we think the ogre is, she describes the ogre, the collapsing entrance behind us, but then the ogre coming out in this cloud of dust still after us. But as he does, like a stone breaks through the drawbridge and he collapses into his own moat that's filled with electric crocodiles. And it's like, electric crocodiles, like electric eels.
Great idea. I'll
only
use that
crocodiles.
Yeah.
And I will tell you that at 8 years old, that description, that made me so well. If you look in the Deadlands Noir companion for the section for the City of Gloom, you will find some electric crocodiles underneath the City of Gloom now.
Immortalized forever.
Immortalized forever. But yeah, totally theater of the mind. And I mean, she's describing it all and everything. And if we had used a map, I don't think it would have been nearly as dramatic and exciting. But like I said, that case, it worked. With the dinosaurs, the kids loved the dinosaurs, especially there was like a little baby Triceratops they had to rescue. And the fact that I actually had a little baby Triceratops miniature, I mean, the kids are like, well, you have to rescue it. Look at it, the big eyes.
Yeah.
So for me, it could go, you can do both. I mean, you really can. Yeah.
I have not been able to master running Roll20, Fantasy Grounds, name it. Maybe someday I will. So everything that I've run online at conventions is theater of the mind. I may show them a map of what I'm talking about. Like I run the one Shane played in last year, Laconia, my hometown in the 50s. I have a section of the downtown saying, okay, just so you know, this is where the VFW is, where you meet, and this is the that kind of thing. But the rest of it, and I've run, and I didn't really realize it until the guy running last week's convention, Eric Carl from TsunamiCon, said, didn't you run that one at a game day where you had all kinds of miniatures and not scenery, but a hill or rock formation, that kind of thing? And I said, yeah. And he said, how did it go, theater of the mind? I said, it was fine. It was, in fact, the ending was, one guy said it was the most cinematic ending he's ever seen or visualized. So I think it can go either way, depending on the GM. Some GMs, I'm not sure they're as good at doing it both ways.
Mm-hmm.
I found that like having miniatures and cool props on the table was great for getting attention and for getting kids initially excited. But you don't want to use them every scene because then it just becomes about everybody passing around the cool tchotchke. And then it's cool. Look at, and then I got some, like Egyptian stuff at Hobby Lobby, right? Like, but then, it quickly derailed to, I want to look at that versus, well, how's your character interacting with it as in the real world, in the world we're playing in, not in the real world. So, I mean, everybody does like the dice and, but let's see, what's another question so on kids games, we talk about like it's easier to have all kids at the table, right? Where, what are some tips though, integrating kids into your adult games or games with adults? Like, are there ground rules that are good to know about? What do you tell the adults first? Was I think one of the things we found in just organizing games at conventions is making it real clear what the age group expectations are for the game. Just because you don't want an adult to show up and then there's a kid at the table and they don't feel that they have the range to do what they want to do at the table or relax in a certain way. So we're pretty clear when there are mixed age games. I don't think we've really had any problem with mixed age games. I know there probably could be. I mean, you can imagine just as you think about language and tone and topics. But for us, it's always just been getting ahead of it, right? Like just make sure that the games are advertised correctly, and if it is a a mixed game, then we'll run games at like smaller game days where there isn't a separate kids track, so gamers will bring their gamer kids and. So just being just advertising first, but any other techniques that come to mind for integrating kids or integrating adults into in either way, just having them both at the table.
I think you're right that you just have to make sure that, like for example, if it's your game group, like a convention, you expect to just kind of roll with it because maybe you weren't expecting for there to be a child at the table, but it's only 4 hours. You can deal with it, right? So, so generally, I think people are very forgiving of that, even if gaming with children is not their thing. Or if they are somebody who is genuinely thrilled at being able to introduce gaming to somebody of, the next generation, then they look at that as a good opportunity. So, I'm not so worried about the convention people as I am, like your game group. That's a much more, sensitive issue. You need to make sure that everybody's on the same page and to have that conversation with them. And it's okay if they're not, because this is their time to relax and it's not necessarily their time to parent your child. So, if they're not comfortable with it, then there's other ways to game. You can game with your children. You can game with other parents and their children. You can game with your friends and have some adult time. And it'll work out. You just have to respect those boundaries and have that conversation. For when you are like integrating people, I'd like to keep those sessions short, especially for when the child is playing. And if you're talking about somebody who's very, very young, you can start by having them be the GM helper. They can help you roll dice. And they can help you move miniatures and they can help you like deal out cards. And, like there's ways that they can help you as a GM without actually being an active participant at the table. So there's that. And then, you get to the point where you can actually have them playing a character at the table too. So look at that, playing with a 4-year-old son. No, I'm going to read this out loud here. So Basic Savage Worlds has been totally workable as a family game with me, my wife, and 4-year-old son. By the way, 4 is young. Yeah. No full-time GM, no sheets. Heroes are all D6s. Baddies are all D4s. 1 simple edge and power each / power each. We all just play. That's fantastic. Dice rolling and counting, especially the exploding dice, is a blast for him. Miniatures and maps helps the fun. Seeing his imagination come to life is fantastic. I'm totally on board with you. And I think, you know what? You can play that in the car. All you need is a dice rolling app. He is even patient between turns. Such a good thing to teach children. Oh my gosh, at 4. That doesn't really happen elsewhere. Also, we keep combat and conflict no more violent or aggressive than the age appropriate shows he might watch. Yes, that's absolutely all that. Do you want to be on this panel, by the way?
Yeah. I think he just was. I will say that last point is very big. When especially what you're talking about, Chris, where you're having adults and kids at the same table. One of the first game rules I touch on is initiative. Specifically, everybody's going to get a card. We're going to count down when it's their card, their turn. But when we get to your card, that's your turn to do what you want. But just to have that, that impetus of not interrupting and jumping in, but they know that their turn, it will get to their turn, what they want to do. And, it's an interesting aspect of discussing initiative. Helps that turn mentality, even when you're not doing an initiative encounter, that everybody kind of is going to get a turn. as you go
Right.
through. Just knowing that you kind of do that. So, and that helps a bit. And oddly enough, it's also something that helps the adults, because sometimes adults are worried about kids interrupting them, and jumping in, and they're disrupting that. Okay, we've had this discussion. This has been there. Everybody feels a little bit more comfortable. The kids know they get their time to talk. Adults aren't going to talk over them, but the adults also know, the kids know when it's your turn to talk, you get to do what you're going to do.
I don't do the initiative except for encounters, but I do go around the table when you're out. What is your character going to do? And depending on what they pick, I may have them do it in different orders, but everyone gets to talk what they're doing that round.
Give everybody that chance.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because some won't speak and others will jump in. I guarantee you that I was the kind of player who didn't wait for somebody else. If I came up with an idea, I spoke and they picked on me, So.
And do you have siblings who will speak for each other? Like, oh, she's going to do this. I'm like, wait, what? Let me hear it from her.
No, not siblings, but I've had players, and this is in adult games, say, you're going to do this, right? And I'm like, well, you're not there to tell them to do that. You're in this other room.
There's some of us who
Chris,
do need
don't
to go
do that
back.
anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, some of us do need to go back to kindergarten sometimes, even as adults, and relearn not to talk over one another at the table and to take our turns, and also be ready to act when it is your turn. Like, you've had all that time to think about it, be ready to go. There are some life lessons to be had there.
Yeah.
Right. And respecting other people's dice.
That's right. Don't roll my dice.
No, it is true. I think it's interesting with running for kids how, again, I think all the issues are very similar to adult issues. Just a lot of things are just more laid bare. For instance, I found by running for kids, it's helped my games running for adults is don't do the info dump at the beginning that's too long. It's very obvious with kids. Adults will be respectful more. We've trained each other to just act attentive. I was like, but wait a minute. Let's get to the action first. Let's get into the game. I can piece this information out as it's needed. It's so much more fun that way than and I think running for kids helped to improve my GMing for adults in that manner. Because adults are just too nice, right? We've learned the techniques to make it seem like we're being polite, or we are polite. But kids are like, no, this is boring. Let's not play this game anymore. It's like, but I was just telling you about the third plot that you could. No. Let's get in there and roll the dice and right.
Are you talking?
Exactly. So, I think running for kids might be a little more difficult just because it's in a sense, you have to be on your game. Like, it's more honest. But I don't think running for adults would be the same level of difficulty if you were just clear-headed on what's really going on. So that is just a small observation I've made from running for kids. I think that's a good question. How have you guys changed or improved your game running for adults by running for kids?
I will say that running for children is just so much more chaotic. So, you really have to juggle a lot because they're just throwing questions at you, even if they are taking their turns and that kind of thing. You're getting asked a question about the plot one time, a mechanic the next, and then and then somebody needs to pee, and can they do that? It's like, you don't need to ask about that. You juggle a lot because you are kind of part babysitter, and you need to acknowledge that, and you are also the one who's responsible for enforcing manners. So I fully support, especially for the younger kids, bennies for manners. When I catch you doing good manners, like, I can tell you're fidgeting in your seat and you're having to wait, and I appreciate that you're waiting. I'm giving you a benny for that. So it's there's different ways that you're running for kids than for adults, and you need to. Well, then when you get to be a GM for adults, you're kind of like, oh, this is nothing.
That's what I was going to say. It's a lot. There's a lot more energy going into a group of kids of the same number of kids and adults. I found that out when I'd be like, wow, I'm exhausted at the end of this game. And that wasn't even the game with 11 kids. So I made sure that I had a break after that to take it easy. But that's a good idea with the seeing, how that they act. Although I did not have that, I have to say, I don't remember any problem. They were all paying attention unless they were tired.
Mm-hmm.
I had one game, and it might have been even that one, with all the kids, where he had obviously he was up late. That his father later told me it was a late night, and then he didn't sleep well. And by the end of the game, he was really dozing until it was the last round before the wicked wizard was going to teleport out of the tower. And he was the only one who had a chance to take him out. And he was playing a character called Randa, a thief. And the other players just started Randa, 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 Randa. And this kid, you could see, he inflated and he rolled and it exploded to like, I don't know, it might have been 32, 40 points, it's some bizarre number and he took out the wizard and they all cheered and, so that was amazing to see it because he'd been paying attention, but you could see him kind of, and then that's all it took was the energy from the other player. And I guarantee you to this day, he remembers that.
Oh, it's his Rudy moment, man. You've made a gamer for life with that.
Yeah. I've never had a moment like that. Now I kind of feel cheated.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. That's what I get for gaming for kids. When I go game with adults, now it's all disappointment. Why don't you cheer for each other?
I don't know. I had a woman who's not that much younger than I am email me a photo of the dice roller when she rolled the first 30 that she's ever rolled. So,
I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, we've seen it. I mean, that's one of the exciting things about running for kids and running for adults is seeing those moments when the adults kind of step back to that level of excitement that you have as kids. Jodi and I and those who are familiar are all familiar with a particular episode of Wild Cards where it came down to the last person in a dramatic task and they needed like 7 successes and aced a D10 3 times in a row, and the excitement around the table was just explosive.
Megan Clutch Caves Kellerman.
Yeah,
that's right. Wow. Megan Clutch Cave Kellerman comes through again, and that's that's one thing of that. Yes, yeah, John, exactly, and that's I guess that's one thing is you take that, and then the other is like running for a group of kids is like running for a table full of Jodis.
I don't know how to take
and that's a good thing, right?
Yeah, you have got to be on your game because they are going to come up with ideas and things, and it's a case where you might have a player do this once a session, and you've got a whole table full of them doing this kind of stuff and coming up with ideas of, like Peter said earlier, take the, let's make this guy into a friend.
Right. Well, and that's what I'm
trying to do.
Right. It's kids is that they're unburdened by the tropes of RPGs that adults fall into to solve problems. Right. Their solutions to problems can be so off the wall that it's not about, I've memorized the best way in this system to accomplish this task, whatever. No, it is, can we just domesticate the dragon? Or, all those kind of things, just the off the wall. And I enjoy, the shameless Savage Worlds plug, but saying yes more often to kids is easier in this system than it is in other systems. Yeah. Just because I have the tool sets as the GM to still keep randomness and dice involved and still allow other players to have their moment too. But still being able to say yes to stuff like, wait, you pulled out the cornerstone of the building, or you forgot to domesticate the dragon, or just the off the wall
roll your die.
Right?
Roll it.
Exactly. Right. Well, that's all I also just like about things, Jodi mentioned like, hey, all the characters are the same just for GM's sake, like, hey, D6s and everything, whatever. It's a good con thing too for pickup games. But the fact, like, having certain systems, even though Savage Worlds isn't specifically written for kids, just things like unskilled rolls, having that where in certain systems, only the thief can pick the lock, right? Well, no, it's not a thing in Savage Worlds. Everybody can try. So you could even explain like, oh, you're the brute who shouldered the door in your lockpick. And still, D4 -2, and it can still explode.
Or you've watched the thief enough times. How hard can this be? Oh yeah, click.
Right? Roll the dice. Roll them.
Yeah. Huh.
So one topic that I did want to get into is I think a lot of people are intimidated on how to get started. Like they want to play games with children. They want this to be a thing that happens for their children, for their nieces, nephews, grandchildren, however, game group, as a teacher for your students, however it is that you're connected to children. You want them because you see it as a gamer yourself, or just all of the psychological benefits. But how to get started? So that is the question that I want to pose to Peter. How would you recommend people get started playing games with their kids?
Well, last week I started with my 10-year-old, a little late, granddaughter for a number of reasons. She likes fairies and things like that. So I just did a quick, I don't know, it wasn't an hour, just to get her started. Where there was a girl, and I had a name for the girl, I forget, who was in her backyard playing when a hole opened up in the air and a fairy came out, said, quick, you've got to come help rescue the unicorn. What do you mean? And then we went from there, and she had to get across a river. As soon as she stepped through, she became more of a thief character in that world with rope and things like that. And did a few kinds of things. She had to pick the lock, get by the sleeping hill giant to pick the lock. They get away, and there's a bunch of trolls who have set up a toll booth on the road, and she's got to come up with a way to pay him and that's all. And that was the adventure. They got back, the unicorn was rescued, and the next one, I'll let you know how it goes. It'll be a little longer. And I think Holly's going to play too. I did that one-on-one, but my feeling at least is that 2, maybe 3, or even is sort of really makes it, because you get that interaction with the players that I think is a good part of the game. I think we've already touched on, Clint brought up or you did, the know what they want, what they like. It reminded me that I think I'm going to have to do a Transformers role-playing game for the other guys, for brothers.
Oh, I don't know. I'd be all about that. So go ahead.
I was going to say another thing to start with, and also to keep in mind for younger kids, is the length of the game. You get into later middle school, okay, they're going to be able to handle a 4-hour game with some adults. But if they're younger than that, or they haven't gamed before, start 2 hours at most, maybe just 1 hour to get in and get started, and just do, like kind of Peter said, do multiple games, give them a chance just to get started, because you're building on that concept of patience and focus, that to stay in the game. And it's just a very real thing for kids that their minds are growing to gain that ability, and when you're young, you're gathering so much energy, you're learning so much so quickly that focus is hard.
Mhm.
because you've got a lot of information coming in that they're accepting about the world that we've already processed and put to the back and we don't think about anymore. Kind of like those preconceived ideas Chris was talking about with gaming that you already have. They don't have that. That's what makes them creative, but it also means keep it short to start out with. Go with that. Keep it short. Let it build into it to where as they get comfortable with it, then they can start to focus and stick around with it a little bit longer. But 1 hour, 2 hour sessions, work with that to begin with.
Mhm.
What techniques do you
And-
guys use to bring out the shy kids?
Water
gosh.
guns.
No. It is tricky, especially if you've got a big crowd, and they're very boisterous, kids. The shy one's not going to come out in that kind of a situation. They're just intimidated, and maybe feeling some peer pressure about how they should be acting. So I would suggest doing the one-on-one thing, like you're talking about, Peter, do like a duet game. Or just get them with other shyer kids and run a maybe even a gentler kind of startup. But if you can get them talking, keep them talking, show them your complete attention. If you are listening to them, but you're also kind of checking or setting things up, that's not listening. You have to be looking at them. You have to show them that you're listening.
That's where Holly came in, my wife Holly, at the helping with the games at Gen Con, because we did have some that, because, well, this one player who was a great player, but I mean, everyone else was 2 or 3 years older. And so, and we've had other shy ones. Holly would be, when it was their turn, she would go to them and say, well, what have you got here? And sort of get them talking to her, but I was hearing too. And then she'd tell me, and I think that brought them out, having a helper. That was Holly's role, and she did it very well. So that helped us in those games.
Yeah, I think that sounds great. And I think what Jodi hit on is my thing is, if you've got a shy kid, absolutely 100% eye contact, focus on that kid. Hey, what do you want to do? What do you want to do? And if the other kids are, hey, guys, remember what we talked about with turns,
All right.
and focus on it. And it's like, that. And, that shy kid may say, well, can I go up into a tree and start sniping? And it's like, you can absolutely do that. Now, who wants to make fun of the shy kid anymore, huh? He'll take you out before you even get near the tree.
And I also want to add that, yeah, it's important to do the eye contact and to show that you're actively listening. But for some kids, that's intimidating. So maybe if you see that that's something that is intimidating to them, redirect it so you're both looking at the same thing, the character sheet together, or rolling the dice and counting the pips together or something, so that you're both engaged in something together, but not looking at each other eye to eye. So.
Yeah, I found very similar technique of just making sure that I actually put it ahead, the top of the sheet I'm running for a game, and this works for adults too. But I think adults know that they can claim agency during their turn that kids might not know. Is I write down everybody's name who's a player, and I put an underline under them when they've had their moment, or at least one moment. And so for kids, that's the thing where if you have the shy kid, I usually ask them at the time where it's like, if they haven't had the moment yet when we're near the big bad, I'll ask them what they want to do. And it might even come down to not even rolling dice, like not even leaving, chance up to it. I know certain people are super simulationist where they don't want you like fudging card initiatives or rolls, whatever that. So you don't have to just tell them what they want to do. And if it's a great idea,
there's a reason for DM screens,
right? But the so it is good though. Is making sure make sure every kid has at least their one
That's
moment.
a good point. Good point.
And for shorter games, you got to be on top of it, because again, a 4-hour game, you might notice, okay, Jim over here hasn't really had his moment yet. Let's see if we can get him involved. But on the shorter kids games, you do need to really stay on top of it, because if it's only an hour and a half or 2-hour game, you kind of want to get that in. But I think that's how I help with the shy kids, is just make sure that when you're so distracted running for everybody else, it's easy to miss
Mhm.
that the one kid's being a little more quiet. So if they don't have the underline or whatever it is, whatever you do, they haven't had their moment yet. So let's get them there. And it might not be the Rudy moment. The Rudy moment's fantastic. But
But
there's
a
something.
moment. Yeah.
Right, yeah, but a moment.
And that's, I think, because that's what that kid is going to remember about the game. That's going to be his memory, and that's what you want to instill.
Yep, I think John's had some experience with kids. Sit beside them so you're not, across from them, so that you're on their side, not adversarial, and both attack the problem together. Yeah.
No,
I
that's
do
great.
that naturally because I walk around all the time while I'm doing it. So
Yeah, that is a good point. The here's another one little tip. Because we're getting close to the hour. The great for new players, but like having a character sheet and everything pre-printed and ready for you, especially for con games. Also great for kids when like everything they need to know about their character is just on that sheet, so they don't have to know the rules. Because it's easier to get an adult. Just, here, look it up yourself, or when it's on page 42, whatever. But for a kid, make sure everything is on that. Even be a little more verbose on the character sheets, or explain. That's another thing too. I think is another big thing is explain the character sheet at the beginning for everybody. Be like, hey kids, this is where your name is. This is where your stuff is. Here you find it. And then and Peter mentioned like that your wife goes around and says, like, what do you have here? Literally, it's like let's look at your character sheet and find out what you can do as a character. So those are good things. For our last round of questions, guys, what question do you have for the rest of the panel on running games for kids or observation? Things we haven't asked yet. So let's see who. I'm going to put Clint on the spot because it's fun to make him go. And
awesome, because I was prepared.
I was going to say he's going to talk for the rest of the time now.
I'm saving you both. I'm going to say my question is, have you read the article we have in the World Builders Guide about running games for kids? Because I have been saving up for 1 week at this time to say last week on our forums, one of the members, through no prodding of my own, mentioned the article I wrote regarding, doing some conversions and doing things with the rules. And then at the end, he said, it's my second favorite article. The one by Jodi on running games for kids is his favorite article in the book. And that was the top, article that was in there for him. And I just waited for this just so I could
so you
tell
could
my
throw
wife
that in.
publicly. And
so you can get brownie points with the wife.
yeah, and maybe I get a brownie.
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Clint just underlined Jody's name on his notepad. Right there.
Jodi moment.
Thank you.
Boy,
I would like to ask the panelists about how many kids do you think you've run for at this point in your life? Like, how many kids total do you think have sat at a game table with you?
Does this count when we were kids? Well,
No, it doesn't count when you were.
No. I didn't play when I was a kid, so that would be, giving you an unfair advantage.
Yep, same here. Clint's the only one has that distinction.
It's gotta be 100 at least, because for how many years I ran it at Gen Con in Milwaukee, and then 4 or 5, and I'd run 3 games per session.
Yeah,
100,
I mean,
100, 200.
Yeah, I can't even, I don't know that anybody can match up with, Peter's numbers, really. I mean, it's like.
I should give Holly credit for part of that. With the stepdaughters, that was one thing, but these were kids we didn't know, and she said, "You ought to do this because it'll help." So,
and we're so very glad that you did, because that was when Savage Worlds was just getting started, and and who better to play it with than kids?
Yeah.
So I think actually, Clint, maybe between you and I together, we've got about 100, maybe. Or something like that. Maybe
between both of us, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I know I'd be somewhere in the, dozens, and because at least 6 per table, obviously, and then you think about each table. I mean, there's sometimes, you know, you don't get as many kids, but then there's, you know, you blow that average out of the water with having 8 players at a table and then kids popping up and other kids taking their place. Because when she says hot seating, it wasn't just once, like the entire table cycled through one time of
2 hours straight.
Hey, if it works, if it works, they have fun.
What they had a great time, and the game just never ended. Basically, it just kept going and going. And there was the middle school game club too that we ran or that we started and ran too. So that wasn't always Savage Worlds. It was a lot of board games mostly because we were still getting them used to the idea of role playing games. But we did play some Savage Worlds games too, and get some of the GM, you know, get some of the kids to be GMs too. So that was my question.
Any board game stepping stones to role playing games that you think are good?
Stuffed Fables. Google it, and I actually got miniatures out of that box for my last Deadlands game. So, you know, you'll just have to, you'll just have to Google it. And it's basically like a storybook format, but every page that you open is a combat map. And then it has, you read the story aloud and you get to pass the book around. So everybody gets a chance to be the GM and the player. And it's very cute. It's definitely oriented towards children, but it's horrific. It's definitely goosebumps territory.
Oh, cool.
So I would say one other thing is something Jodi just touched on real quickly is we've talked about running games for kids. Do not be afraid to let a kid run a game for you. You know, let's build our next generation of game masters and everything like that. And that may be, you know,
I'll take the team. You go ahead and rag on.
The most trying on your patience of anything, more than running for kids. That may be to play like that. But, you know, if you got to go through and then, you know, gently or so give them the criticisms and things if it has to be. I mean, you know, I've played under kids that were they're the opposition GM. I'm here to beat you or whatever. And, you know, at the end, you got to say, hey, you know, it's a cooperative game. You want them to win. You want to present a challenge, but you want to create a great story. So you can talk about how they beat this, you know, this terrible thing. You know, that's the goal. Not, you know, bringing in a ghost that they can't hurt to attack them because, you know, they're going through all the zombies. I can do what I want. Yeah.
But also, what I was saying about like, go ahead and rag on me is the first time one of our girls wanted to run a game for us, I went to Clint and I was like, do we have to? I mean, I could be gaming. and it was like, you need to do this for your kids. It's just the same as like doing dishes, right? You know, you just got to do it. And that, my friends, was when we got the electric crocodiles. So
sure.
I don't regret that at all. I regret my reluctance to go to that game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah, that's great.
You will always regret not doing it more than doing it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, not specific to role play, but my dad's a consummate storyteller. Used to, I mean, I remember the stories he told me, you know, going to sleep at night. And I got to see with my younger cousins was that he'd tell them a story and it would be a short story. And he'd demand they tell him one back. And it was, you know, the younger kids would almost tell you the exact same story you told, right? You know, but, you know, just watching that improve and how that worked and just, you know, being able to unlock that creativity and that, you know, that the idea that kids can have the ownership to be creative in that way it is very rewarding to see. So final one to you, Peter, anything that we haven't asked you or any of the panels, what you got a question for us or even just a little nugget of wisdom that we haven't imparted on gaming for kids?
I think all of my wisdom has been imparted.
I doubt that. I bet we could pick the brain for hours longer. But when you're asked, like, you know, but when you're asked, hey, give us everything you know, you know, it's hard to do that kind of brain dump. So
I think Peter has touched on one final point, which is always save something for later. You know, leave the kids with that, you know,
I
that
will
hope to want to come back and play again sometime, you know.
I will say one thing if we have time. The someone mentioned about the construction of the game and letting them do what, I think it was Clint, letting them do what they want to do. I think that's one thing that I've gotten better at, even though I was doing it on my own, is I'm very flexible. Here's the path. But if they get a good idea and go off this way, I just make sure there's a way to come around. And working with kids, I think, made me even better at that, because they never followed the path anywhere near the path. And I had to, and it works to be flexible as the GM. I'm not the kind who writes out or writes it out and here's what's got to happen one after another, or however it is. If it's something that I hadn't thought, I mean, lots of times the players come up with a thing that's a better idea than what I had, so I go with theirs. That's what I'll leave it as.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you really want to see a railroad storyline get derailed, run it for kids.
Oh, it won't be even the same world.
That's right.
Throw that one out the window.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, guys, awesome panel. Thank you for revealing all the knowledge you guys have, or not all of it, most of it. We'll be waiting for some more on how to run games for kids. So we'll be back, I think, in an hour. Clint is going to go into the rules, and then later on tonight, we're going to have the Holler Q&A with Holler creators Tim Early and Tracy Sizemore. So, guys, if you haven't checked out Holler, it's on Kickstarter now. We are suspiciously close to 70,000, which is the big stretch goal with that lovely leather cover. So
I'll have to spend more money, I guess.
I know, right? You should upgrade. It's so worth it. We established in the last panel that it might actually be sheep squatch skin and that nice leatherette cover. So
well, let me rethink that.
I mean, come on. There's Corinthian leather and there's sheep squatch, and it's good stuff. Yeah, okay. We appreciate it. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Clint. Thank you, Jodi, and everybody else. Enjoy the rest of this Hollerween weekend, and we'll see you in about an hour for another panel. Cheers, folks.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.